Welcome to the Restoring Our Cities podcast. I'm your host, Jobbin, and I'm excited to bring you a new series that we are kicking off on leadership. And so, with the Restoring Our Cities podcast, this is our platform where we have unfiltered conversations on today's topics that are really impacting our generation and our community. And so, we are excited to kick off this topic on leadership and really discuss the details of what makes a great leader. What are some of those characteristics? Then, also, what are some of those barriers that stop us from becoming great leaders? And so, on this week's episode, we are connecting with Toby Kurien, who's been an entrepreneur and working in the marketing world for so many years, and he shares his insight into some of the traits that make up great leaders. And this conversation goes all over the place from characteristics to some of the fears, but also even things in our society, like really important questions such as, is Michael Scott from The Office a great leader? I know you're all dying to hear that. So it's been a fun and great conversation with Toby. So we hope you enjoyed this episode. And as always, if you haven't already, please like and subscribe to the Restoring Our Cities podcast on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. You can watch a video episode of this on YouTube as well. And you can find all of our social media handles at our website at restoringourcity.org. So we're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all of those fun things. So feel free to follow us and engage in the conversation. But we really hope you enjoy this episode. And we are going to be sharing some great insight from some great leaders and interviews coming up really soon on leaders who are making an impact in our community. So we're excited to share that with you. So please continue to share your feedback. We love to hear from you and enjoy this episode. Well, let's jump into this week's episode, and we are excited to kick off a new series in leadership, which I think is an applicable topic because I think, really one of the things that I've been thinking about with this podcast is not that it would just blow up and take over the world, but that we would actually have
But
some.
you kind of wish that just a little bit.
How would a podcast take over the world? It'd be interesting to see, right? But it's really to have conversations that maybe people are talking about, are having, or maybe not applying. And I think like leadership is one of those topics that I feel like is a buzzword in like business, or even like we throw around in our South Asian brown community, like, oh man, he's a leader, and she's a leader, we have great leaders, and it just seems so general. But I wanted to talk about leadership more from a practical standpoint, and then really get some insight. And so, Toby, I'm excited that you're on this episode because we've had some great conversations, and you being a leader in your community and even in business, and taking on leadership roles in the marketing world. I kind of wanted to get your thoughts on leadership, but before we dive into like the details, I kind of wanted to just talk about what it means, to us. Like, what does leadership mean? What's kind of the first things that come to your mind when somebody brings up the subject of leadership?
Yeah, man. I mean, someone who is trustworthy and someone who is, accountable. That I think that's definitely like one of the basis for a strong leader. And of course there's other things to it, but I think that would be something that you want to start a leader with, with.
Like trustworthy, accountable.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that you don't just right off the bat say the most skilled person, like the most talented person.
Right. Yeah. I don't know how to say this, but like that person could be the most skilled person, but if they're not a trustworthy person, they're not going to be able to create relationships within the community, create a relationship with each other. And I think that's the core of it. For a leader should be creating something of a community. And, of course, if you're in business, creating some type of product or some type of, company or whatever it is. But it all starts with, everybody around you and then you.
Yeah, yeah. And I bring that up too because, and that's a really great point, because I think the view of leadership, like in our community, and like growing up in the South Asian brown community, a lot of church community too, a lot of people will say, oh, this person's a leader. And you'd be like, why? Why are they a leader? What defines them as a leader? And it's because of the position, right?
Yeah.
Like they
Yeah.
have a title, and it really is focused around that individual person, not necessarily about the traits that they affect on the people around them.
And of course, like if they earn that title through those things, you know, I understand. I think Joby, you're probably thinking more like the type of stuff like we grew up around, where there was a lot of like title, almost no leadership. You know what I'm saying?
Like high talent, low leadership
Yeah,
skills.
yeah, yeah. You
Yeah,
know.
that's yeah. The more I think about it, it's kind of like this designation that people get put on them, but like it's valuable, right? We like the reason why they put titles on people or give people positions is because there's a need that needs to be fulfilled there. But man, I feel like there's lacking leadership in our community when it comes to really important topics too, because you need those voices that can rally people together. There's got to be something that rallies like our people in our community, and like they need to see true leadership. That's kind of the purpose of this series is I really want our community to start to see leadership in its truest sense. You know what I mean?
What would you say that would be?
Um, I think there's like a perception of leadership, and I'm not like
Hmm.
talking about anybody in particular, but I'm
Right.
like, I feel like the way that we grow up is like, look at this person, and maybe it's a South Asian thing, like, oh, compare ourselves to this person or that person. Look
Hmm.
at them, they're a leader, aspire to be them. But then when you take
Hmm.
a closer look at why they are telling us to look and position ourselves after these people, it's because of a title and it's because of a
Hmm.
skill or something like that.
Hmm.
It's not true
Hmm.
leadership when you look at it, you know?
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, I know we've Toby, you and I, we've gone to that Catalyst conference in Atlanta, which is a leadership conference, and done that several years, and it's been always like super informative, and I think that's really what helped shaped my ideas of leadership. Um, and I want to cite this book if anybody's looking for a good book on leadership. I would always recommend Andy Stanley because he talks about like some real practical stuff.
Yeah. He's
And
he's good.
yeah. One of the best books that I've read years ago is Next Generational Leaders. And he wrote this book with a lot of great principles, but I'll just kind of summarize it. He says there's five essentials for those who will shape the future, like characteristic traits of a leader. And so he says this competence, courage, clarity, coaching, and character.
Hmm.
Those five things are really what make up a leader. And I was like thinking about that and like that's really great qualities to have. Competence, you kind of have to know what you're talking about in whatever realm. Courage, clarity, coaching, character. I think Toby, you even alluded to character a little bit. But those are
Hmm.
some of the things that I don't think people in our community are seeing, right? Um, so yeah, that's kind of where I really want this next series to kind of go is to really exhibit some of those qualities that people might not have read the book, but they see those things. They say, "Wow, this person has high character,"
Yeah.
or "This person is competent and knows what they're talking about in whatever avenue." So, like, have you seen? Maybe this is a question for you, Toby. Like, have you seen people get misguided on what leadership is truly about, or maybe they think of themselves as a leader, but they really don't have the chops to make it?
I could really speak to from like a business standpoint. The biggest mistake that I see is like people who have high level of intelligence and high level of skill in whatever they do, but they lack communication with like one another. You know, um, because most of the problems when you root like when you try to keep going to the root of it. So like there's a technique where you ask seven whys. You know, so if
Hmm.
it's a problem, you ask why. Then whatever that problem is, you ask why again and why again till you get to the root cause of it. You know,
Hmm.
and so for most part, the root cause is not really communicating with each other on a human level, I guess. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
sometimes like it's always like, oh yeah, that person is I heard that person is that way, or I seen that person do that thing. So because of that, I don't want to communicate with that person. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like at the root of it is like it's like you need to communicate with each other, and no matter how skilled and intelligent you are, if you can't communicate with another human being, um, it's it's lost. Like it's not a good skill to have if you're trying to be a leader.
Yeah, because I sometimes think we blame the problems, like especially in business. Oh, why didn't we get X amount of revenue or whatever what was really stagnating our process? And you can almost boil it down to whatever process went wrong. But then if you dig deeper into that, it's somebody didn't communicate or somebody didn't share this or
Yeah.
somebody didn't
Right.
develop you,
Right.
right?
Right. Right.
Have you seen that in like work situations and
Oh, yeah,
maybe,
all the time, all the time. I mean, that's just it's just it's the biggest struggle of like the of the modern American office.
yeah, yeah,
It's just like and some people don't want to communicate. They know what to communicate, but they don't want to. They refuse
right.
because because some of it is because they want to see the other person kind of fall or fail, and that's just a reality of things. Like that's what happens in the world. It's crazy.
Man, I feel like we all need like Michael Scott, because he would really communicate to the office. I think about the episode where he talked about like when Jim had to coordinate birthdays and he combined everybody's birthday in 1 month and
Oh
thought that was
yeah,
a
I
good
made
idea.
that. He's like, I made that's the episode where he went into the woods to find himself.
Right. But then, it's insightful because he's in the woods and he remembers it's Creed's birthday. And he starts,
Yeah, Michael Scott. Say what you want about Michael Scott, but he was all about that. He was all about creating a certain harmony within his
yeah,
office,
with those people. He knew
and
his
then it just
people.
kind of works. Yeah, he's like, as long as you keep harmony, like it just kind of works.
Yeah,
That's what he was trying
exactly.
to relay, like the whole series.
Right. And that's the crazy thing. You start seeing him as, oh, if I start watching the series, he's this incompetent manager. But then you realize he is a people person and people actually
Yeah,
still kind of work together well underneath his, whatever his leadership style is. That's a
or
question.
maybe, or maybe everybody has like one common thing that they hate, and it's him.
Right? They find unity in that. So,
Yeah.
is that a philosophical question? Is Michael Scott a true leader? Is
Ooh,
that up for debate? Like, is there
somebody should write a paper on that.
Oh man, that would be hilarious. I feel like there are some traits of leadership, of true leadership, of bringing people together. Because you might not be the most skilled person, but can you rally people together?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
can you get people to believe in a common idea?
yeah. And it has to be within truth. It can't be like some. It can't be a pyramid scheme. It has to be rooted in truth. And
Right? Like running a paper company and
yeah,
and trying to forget about the internet that's coming up. So no, that's interesting, man, because I can feel like this could be applicable to so many avenues of life, like family and and church or your job. Like you don't have to worry about being the absolute best skilled person at it to become a leader, but you have to know how to have like high character, like you were saying, like
hmm
trustworthiness and accountability. Like that's the worst thing if you can't trust your leaders, right?
hmm
And like if
hmm
you can't depend on them, like because there's got to be some aspect of leadership where you as maybe the colleague or the employee might not know how to get from point A to point B and that leader brings you there. There's got to be some kind of
right,
competence there.
right, right.
Um,
And it has to be like a such a high accountability that it's it's more you have more accountability than like the rest. If it's your employees or if it's a group that you're leading or whatever, not it's almost like, I mean, take for example, like a lot of like religious institutions are failing because why? The morality of the leader wasn't there because he was supposed to separate because he was supposed to be the priest of God, right? So he's supposed to separate. but these people didn't, and that's why there's just so much distrust within, among, for the leaders of this country. It's the same thing in the corporate world,
Yeah.
like back in the day. I mean, let's admit it. Like there was a lot of like pull for, there was not such a wide gap between the employee and the boss.
Hmm.
Now it's like billions of dollars,
Right.
of separation. I mean, that's, a failure of leadership if you think about it, because you have such a low percent, or you have a high percentage of people making such a low percentage versus, your very top, your
Top
leadership.
1% or
That's,
whatnot. Yeah.
yeah, and that's another failure of, like not being able to be a,
I didn't
accountable,
think about it.
trustworthy person.
I didn't think about that because, there's obviously disparity in income. And I mean, we can get into economics and all that kind of stuff. But like
Right,
from a leadership perspective, if one of the characteristics of you as a leader is to help bring people along with you, is there aspects of that you have to be accountable for, right? And not to
right,
create
right,
disparity or distance between you, but to actually
right.
bring some people together. And people might think that that's a partisan, oh, that's your economic policy. No, strictly from a leadership standpoint, I think there's some truth to that, right? Like
Yeah,
it's got to be team effort. No, that's pretty insightful, I think, because we're seeing obviously that in our government. I think no matter which way you kind of lean, I think we saw this in like the 2016 election. People are like, oh my gosh, the we got to pick between two evils, right? And then you start to
right.
hear some of that now, or people are just like a little off put
I
by
mean,
leadership.
that's like a whole different animal. You know what I mean?
Yes,
Like
yes,
this, I mean, this is the federal government of the United States. I mean, it's crazy what's happening right now. I
yeah,
mean, we shouldn't be, we shouldn't have to be picking from like the two lesser evils,
yeah, yeah.
but here we are. Here we
Yeah,
are.
it's crazy because like even like the perspective of leadership and whatever your thoughts are on like the president, like the way you've used the president before 2016 and in the last couple of years now, it's very different, right? Like what's presidential and what's not. And I don't want to get too much down the road of politics, but like leadership is outward facing as well, right? Like there's got to
Right.
be like aspects of it that because like I was just thinking about this thought the other day, like even looking at social media, right? Like anybody can post whatever the heck they want on social media, right?
Yeah.
You can post whatever you want. But like something that kind of disturbs me is when I see somebody of influence post something irresponsible. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? And
Yeah.
like that's where you kind of see like, oh man, like you shouldn't say that or you shouldn't do that. I mean, I think that's kind of the commentary of like our president now, or hey, pick and choose your words, or even like if church or somebody said something, in the congregation, all right, oh, that uncle said that, oh, whatever. But if the pastor did that or
Yeah.
somebody in a role, you'd be like, and I think we've all heard this in our communities, like, oh man, I can't believe this secretary said that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of those things where outward facing commentary, your communication, maybe it's just communication skills again that really impact you. I wanted to read just this one piece from this book that talks about courage, that says good leaders see what needs to change and have the courage to act on it. So, courage, like risk taking, there's like this, I don't know, gusto. There's this like characteristic about a leader that's willing to like go for it. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And take
Yeah.
risks. And Toby, I know with you and even the marketing world and working on your own stuff and taking risks, I think you have a lot of great insight into that. What is it that about leaders that maybe separate them from the rest, or how do they develop the courage to take the first step when others might still stand back?
Yeah. I think it has to do with a lot of. I mean, if you're a good leader and you want to take courage, but you got to take courage with some type of weight behind it, meaning like, did you do the work behind it before you take that leap,
A good leader has to be prepared before they take a step.
Right, exactly. Right, right.
So like you can't be like reckless and be like, "Hey, I'm
No,
gonna
you
do this
can't be
new idea."
reckless. So you got to come prepared. You got to take that crazy leap that everybody's saying, no, you shouldn't do it, and then really get in there and do the work. I think if you have what most people do is they never, take the leap to begin with, you
Okay.
know?
Yeah.
That's a lot of people. And that's fine. That's just a majority of people. But when you take the leap, then there's the people that take the leap, and there's no planning. It's just kind of like leaping forward
They
and
just
doing something. It's like, dude,
leaping into the abyss. It's like you just
yeah,
jumped
it's like,
into a
dude,
pit.
you should. It's like if you wanted to like put together like some type of rally or something like it's like, dude, you didn't think of getting registration forms. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
you just didn't plan even plan it.
Yeah.
And if you do both of those things and then you take that leap and then you work at it, like whatever it is, like you keep working at it, getting better and better and better. Like I feel like that is a not just a leader, but that's an effective leader.
Mm.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's an
Yeah.
effective leader.
Man, I feel like that's so scary. I think like to take the leap in itself. I feel like that's a whole episode.
That's why most people don't do it. And we just, again, like that's cool, but like that's what it is. Like even taking the leap is so hard.
So, but would you say that the people who don't take the leap are not leaders?
You know, I wouldn't say that. I would say that like it might not be like you might be better like supporting and then like slowly kind of growing into a leader. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's the same thing, man. Like again, I'm sorry for going back to business, but it's the same thing. Like there's a lot of people who are entrepreneurs. They just take the leap and they do the work and they do a really good job, or they fail.
Hmm. Hmm.
And then there's like the people who will work somewhere for a long time, learn a skill, and then branch off into their own thing. You know?
But there is still
Um,
a leap there. You know what I mean? Like, I
yeah,
guess where I'm trying to get at is this courage thing, right? Like,
yeah,
I feel like if that's every single leader has to have some element of courage, there's some element of risk, right? Like, there's a fear that the followers don't do because they want to play it safe. But the
hmm,
leaders have to have some element of risk and
yeah,
possibility of failure because I almost feel like that's what separates. I mean, we could talk
right,
about basketball too, right? Like when we talk about take the last shot, you know what I'm saying? I know the Lakers just played, and there's all this criticism of LeBron James of not taking the last shot. We are recording this before whatever game 6, but
yeah,
I don't know. I mean, I don't think that was just if you watch the basketball play, but like there's some people who are afraid to take the last shot because
yeah,
they're afraid of missing. You know?
yeah.
Like I think that's what separates. Like, now I'm not making a comparison of Jordan and LeBron. I don't think there is a comparison, but um,
We all knew that we were gonna get here. We're talking in
that's not
Chinese.
even an episode, right? That's not even an episode. Like,
It's
there's no
not even a
conversation there.
conversation, Joey. There's no conversation
There's
there.
no conversation.
We
Like,
know who the
we're just
goat is.
end. I'm just gonna hit end. I mean, that's it. There's
Done.
one A, one B. So, but the thing that's what separates some people. Like not commentating on LeBron's last game, but like any basketball player, if you're afraid to take the shot, that doesn't mean you're not a great basketball player. That doesn't mean you're not a great skill shooter or defensive player. It doesn't mean any of that. But the characteristic, right? Like, I feel like that every great leader needs that ability.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
I
absolutely.
I wonder what do you think is the biggest obstacle for people who are like, hey, I want to get into leadership. I feel like I can lead. What do you think is the biggest obstacle for like people in our community, people who are listening to this that's preventing them from taking the leap from follower to leader?
I mean, truthfully, it might be a lot of like just barriers of entry. Like the church is not doing something. The church is not allowing that to flourish or grow, or it's just that like they don't have an avenue, or they're younger, so they don't have like certain things that they need to like you know, they don't have certain tools that they need to, like, you know, have to be, you know, to go and do that. It could be a lot of things, you know.
Yeah.
It could be a lot of things. I mean, but I think the best thing to do is do the small steps. You know, if it's like supporting someone in something, that's, there you go. You know, you're being a leader in that. If you're, you know, like helping out somewhere, like because someone is in like some type of, you know, need, go do that. That's your leadership right there. You
Yeah.
know. Um,
Yeah, and I feel like I think you bring up a lot of good points too, because there's systems that stop us from taking next steps, but should we let that system or organization or lack of, like you said, resources, right? Like I might
mhm.
not have the funding or resources to do that. Like people might hear that and say, well, what if we gave you the resources? Like
Right.
could we be like suppressing potential of a lot of great potential leaders? You know what I mean? Like if somebody wants to take the leap into leadership, or like I have this great new idea, but my church isn't doing this, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
What to me, I'd be like, well, why don't you just do it on your own?
Just do yourself.
Do it
Yeah.
yourself?
Do yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like that's one of those things that I learned like young, like
I mean,
not
that's one of those things you did young. I mean, like if you, the, you know, the guys who are like don't know Joby that well, like we known each other for a long time, but Joby started Rock 322 pretty much. Like I know you, all the guys started it with you, but I feel like you took that initial step to like start this, and you know, this is a prime example. Like just start it. Like if
yeah.
that's not, that avenue is not available, like create that avenue. You know,
Yeah.
go do that.
No, and I appreciate that, Toby. And I feel like I got some feedback when we kicked off season two with some people listening, and they sent me a message. They're like, "Oh, I love the podcast," and it was great feedback. And the comment that struck me was, "I'd love to start my own podcast, but I just need to wait till I get my life together, or I just need to make sure I get a little bit older, and
Yeah.
I can get this going." And it gave me a little bit of like just a general idea. But my response was just like, "Don't wait,
Yeah,
do
just
it,
do it.
just do it.
Yeah, do it.
Who
Do
cares
it.
if it fails?" We get a lot of
Yeah.
feedback on the last episode that some people are like, "Man, you got to do this, you got to do that." I'm like, totally fine, like
Yeah. And we've been doing this for a long time, and people still say, hey, you guys suck.
yes. And I think maybe we're just too old to like let it affect us. I don't know. Are we getting
We're
senile?
bitter old men
Maybe we're
now.
not as sensitive. I mean, I think there is a
We
level of
grew up in a
sensitivity.
tougher generation.
I don't care what you say to me. Yes. Yeah, we grew up, back in the day.
Yeah, it was back in the day, the
We'd have
90s.
no comments on social media. Oh my gosh. No, I will say, I think maybe having a kid or just being busy, I don't really try to pay attention too much. But if I do hear some feedback and I really need to make a change, yeah, just take that. But that shouldn't prevent you from taking that step forward. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, do what you can. You know, whatever that might be, just do it. You know, you got to just put the work in. And, you know, things will start happening. Especially if you're young, like in this age with all this like digital tools where you could reach, you know, anywhere, literally anywhere in the
Yep.
world. You know, you could have a fan base in North Korea, man. Like you know what I mean? Like
That might be the only place that you can't.
that might be the only place you can do. But right south of there.
Well, I mean, Toby, before we even jumped on, I think you shared like a TikTok video with me. And like if
Gotta,
if you think you cannot start your own like business or idea
yeah,
or be a leader, just go to TikTok and look at the dumb stuff that is on TikTok. Like if you can't create a following from whatever niche you're interested in, you're just not looking hard enough, because look at all the dumb things that are on the internet. And like people like Toby will watch it, right?
I love TikTok. I don't care. Like there's just so, dude, honestly, there's so much creative stuff out there too. It's hilarious.
No, I haven't really dove into that world. There's got to
I
be a
feel like
point,
you,
man.
huh?
No, there's got to be a point, right? Like in our life where like when the next social media avenue comes up that Like, do I get old enough to a point where I'm like, I am not signing up for this, right?
Yeah, I thought that too with TikTok. Like, and yeah, man, it's so funny. It's too funny sometimes.
This is a shameless plug for Toby's TikTok. So
Yeah,
if you want to follow him,
yeah. Don't
hopefully
follow me. I don't want to be followed. I just want to watch my videos in peace.
on this episode of leadership, we end off with Toby saying, "I don't want to be followed.
No, I don't want to be followed.
Do not follow me. I'm nothing to
Unfriend
contribute."
me from everything. Just let me watch my videos in peace.
Man, it's a great point, man. There's so many. I feel like the opportunities are just expanding for people out there to do what you want and to like take the chance, take the leap of faith, risk it all, and like go try to make some change. And hopefully it's positive things, right? It's not just dumb episodes on TikTok, but probably want to encourage you to do something like change the world. But Toby, thanks for jumping on, man. I feel like as we get into this series of leadership, we'll have some great guests and kind of pick their brains on how they developed into becoming a leader and like what are some of those characteristics that maybe we can all learn. So I'm hoping our community starts to hear these obviously candid conversations, but at the same time learns something about maybe pursuing something, moving forward, taking a risk, being a trustable, accountable, dependable type of leader, because those are the people who make change, right? Those are the people who really change the world and can be a positive influence in their community. So, thank you, Toby, for sharing your insight. And we will talk to you guys on the next episode. Thanks for listening to the Restoring Our Cities podcast. We hope you enjoyed that episode. As always, if you haven't already, please like and subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. You can follow the video episodes on YouTube, subscribe there, and then also connect with us on our social media handles on Instagram or on Facebook at Restoring Our City. And we're on Twitter at Rock322. You can find all of this information on our website at restoringourcity.org. So thanks again for listening and have a great week.